The accidental proposal. John never expected that buying a simple ring would change his life forever. But in that moment, standing in the grand alien palace, surrounded by towering guards with glowing spears, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. The story began just a few hours earlier. John was an explorer, traveling across different planets, curious about new cultures and strange artifacts. This time, he found himself on the planet Valyria, home to a proud and ancient alien race known as the Zilarians. They were tall, elegant beings with shimmering blue skin and bright golden eyes. Humans were allowed on their planet, but only as visitors, never as equals. John wandered through the bustling marketplace, amazed by the variety of alien goods, floating crystals, talking plants, and food that changed color every few seconds. As he walked past a dark corner, an old Zilarian merchant called out to him, "Human, you have the eyes of a traveler. Perhaps you seek something special." John turned and saw the merchant holding out a small silver ring. It was simple, but it had a strange blue gem in the center, glowing softly. "What is it?" John asked, intrigued. The merchant smiled, showing sharp teeth. "A symbol of great honor among my people, a lucky charm, if you will. Only a true warrior can wear it." John chuckled. He wasn't a warrior, but the ring looked cool and the price was cheap. He tossed a few credits at the merchant and slipped the ring onto his finger. And that's when everything went wrong. Alarms blared across the marketplace. Zilarians around him gasped and took a step back, eyes wide with shock. Within seconds, palace guards surrounded him, their golden armor shining under the twin suns of Valyria. "You dare commit such an offense, human," one of them growled. John blinked in confusion. "Wait, what? What did I do?" The guards didn't answer. Instead, they grabbed his arms and dragged him through the city, heading straight for the royal palace. The palace was a massive, glowing structure built from smooth white stone and decorated with floating golden lights. John barely had time to admire it before he was thrown onto his knees in the center of a grand hall. A group of Zilarian nobles stood in a semicircle around him, their expressions filled with shock, anger, and curiosity. Then the doors at the far end of the hall burst open. A woman entered, her royal robes flowing behind her. She was tall and graceful, her blue skin glowing under the soft palace lights. Her golden eyes locked onto John with intense fury. She was stunning, but also terrifying. John gulped. Even without an introduction, he knew exactly who she was. The Zilarian princess. And she looked very unhappy. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice sharp like a blade. One of the nobles stepped forward, bowing. "Princess Zora, this human, has claimed you as his wife." John's brain stopped working for a second. "Wait, what?" he shouted. The princess looked equally shocked. Her eyes darted to John's hand, where the silver ring still gleamed. "You fool," she snapped. "Do you even know what that ring means?" John looked down at the ring. It means unlucky." The nobles gasped. A few even whispered in disbelief. Zara closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then glared at John. "That is the royal binding ring," she said through gritted teeth. "It is an ancient symbol of our people. The only ones allowed to wear it are the rulers of Valyria and their chosen mates." John stared at her, his heart pounding. "So, you're saying..." Zara crossed her arms. "By our laws, you have just proposed to me." Silence filled the room. Then, John let out a nervous laugh. "Ha! Funny joke. Okay, let's take this offhand." He tried to pull the ring off, but it wouldn't budge. His smile vanished. The nobles muttered among themselves. The ring has bonded with him. The choice has been made. John's stomach dropped. "Wait. I'm your husband now," he blurted. Princess Zora looked equally horrified. "Absolutely not." The nobles whispered urgently, discussing the situation. Meanwhile, John and Zara just glared at each other, both equally frustrated. Finally, one of the elders spoke. "Princess, the law is absolute. The ring has chosen. You are bound to this human unless you find a way to annul the marriage." Zara clenched her fists. "Then we need to find a way. Immediately." John nodded quickly. "Yes, please. No offense, Your Highness, but I'm not exactly husband material." Zara sighed, rubbing her temples. "I agree. The sooner we fix this, the better." But before they could continue, one of the guards rushed in, looking panicked. "Princess, there is an assassination plot against you. Someone within the palace does not want this marriage to be undone." John felt a chill run down his spine. Zara's expression hardened. "Looks like we have bigger problems," she muttered. John gulped. What had he just gotten himself into? The escape plan. John's heart was still racing from the moment he heard the guard's words. "There's an assassination plot against you." The grand hall, with its shining white pillars and floating lights, suddenly felt darker, more dangerous. The nobles whispered among themselves, their golden eyes flicking between John and Princess Zara. But something was wrong. John could feel it. Someone in this palace didn't just want Zara dead. They wanted him gone too. "Guard," Zara snapped, her voice sharp and commanding. "Explain yourself. Who would dare plot against the royal bloodline?" The guard, tall and broad with shimmering armor, bowed deeply. "Your Highness, we intercepted a message between palace staff. The plan is clear. They intend to assassinate you tonight, during the evening feast. The blame will fall on the human." John's stomach twisted. "Wait. What? Why me?" Zara turned to him, her golden eyes narrowing. "Because you are the perfect scapegoat. A human accidentally marries the princess, insults our ancient traditions, and then tries to kill her. It's the perfect story. No one would question it." John swallowed hard. "Great, just great. So what do we do?" Zara hesitated, her mind racing. She was proud, a princess of Valyria, trained in diplomacy and royal etiquette, but not in dealing with this. She glanced at the stubborn human beside her, realizing she had no choice but to trust him, at least for now. "We escape," she said finally, "but we do it carefully. If the assassin realizes we know, they'll act sooner. We need to make them believe everything is normal." John blinked. Escape. From this. He gestured to the massive palace, with its endless hallways, guards on every corner, and floating drones scanning the corridors. Zara smirked. "You married me, human. Now you get to see how a princess handles things." As they were escorted to Zara's private chambers, John noticed the suspicious glances from the guards. Some looked angry, others amused. But a few looked too calm, too calculated. One of them was definitely in on it. Once inside Zara's quarters, a luxurious room filled with glowing plants, shimmering fabrics, and a view of the twin moons, Zara activated a privacy shield. The walls shimmered, and the room fell into a strange, quiet stillness. "They can't hear us now," she whispered. John let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Okay, so what's the plan?" Zara paced the room, her mind sharp and focused. "The ring binds us by ancient law, but there's a secret ritual that can annul the marriage. It's hidden deep in the royal archives." John frowned. "Sounds simple enough. Why not just go there and do it?" Zara shot him a look. "Because the archives are heavily guarded, and the assassin knows that's where we'll go. They'll expect it. We need to find a way to get there without being noticed." John rubbed his temples. "All right, stealth mode. Got it. But, I'm not exactly a ninja." Zara chuckled softly, the first time John had seen her relax even a little. "Good, because we won't be sneaking. We'll be blending in." A few hours later, the evening feast began. The grand hall was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of exotic alien food. Zilarian nobles in shimmering robes sipped glowing drinks, their voices echoing under the high ceilings. John and Zara entered together, pretending to be the happiest newlyweds in the galaxy. Zara's arm was looped through John's, her smile bright, but her eyes sharp, scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. John, on the other hand, was trying his best to look natural. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath. "I can't believe we're faking a honeymoon while someone's trying to kill us." Zara's smile didn't waver. "Welcome to royal life, husband." As they moved through the feast, John noticed something strange. Every time they passed certain nobles, conversations would suddenly stop. Eyes followed them, but some were filled with more than just curiosity. Suspicion, anger, hatred. And then he saw him. A tall, thin noble with piercing silver eyes. He stood near the head of the table, watching them with a cold, calculating gaze. He raised his glass slightly when Zora's eyes met his, a small, knowing smirk on his lips. "Who's that?" John whispered. Zora's smile faltered for just a second. "That's Lord Callan, my father's most trusted advisor." John's gut twisted. "I'm guessing he's not sending us a wedding gift." Zora's eyes darkened. "No, he's the one behind this." But before they could react, a loud voice rang out across the hall. To the new couple, Lord Callan announced, his voice dripping with false cheer. "May their union bring peace between humans and Solarians." The crowd raised their glasses, but the tension in the room was thick. Zara and John exchanged a quick glance. "We need to get out of here," John whispered. Zara nodded. "Follow my lead." As the feast continued, Zara led John toward a side door, pretending to be leading him on a private tour. But as they slipped into a dark corridor, they heard footsteps behind them. The guards weren't going to let them leave so easily. "Run," Zara hissed. They sprinted through the palace, dodging through narrow hallways and hidden passages Zora knew from her childhood. But no matter how fast they moved, the guards were always close behind. Finally, they reached a hidden passageway leading to the royal archives. Zora placed her hand on a glowing panel, and the wall slid open. "In here," she whispered. But just as they slipped inside, John felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. He looked down to see a small dart sticking out of his skin. His vision blurred, and the last thing he saw was Zora's panicked face as everything went black. The hidden threat. John awoke to darkness. His mind felt foggy, like he was waking from a deep sleep, but something was wrong. The cold, metallic floor beneath him was uncomfortable, and a sharp pain throbbed in his shoulder where the dart had hit him. As his vision cleared, he realized he was lying in a dimly lit room, the walls made of smooth alien metal that pulsed with faint blue lights. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, casting eerie shadows. Chains bound his wrists and ankles, their metallic grip cold and unyielding. But the worst part, Zara was nowhere to be seen. "Zara?" John croaked, his voice dry and weak. There was no answer, only the faint hum of some alien machinery in the background. Panic started to rise in his chest. Had they taken her? Was she hurt? Or worse, was she dead? John struggled against the chains, but they were too strong. His mind raced, trying to remember what had happened. They were running through the palace, trying to escape the feast when the dart hit him. Zara had been right there. Where was she now? Before he could process anything further, the door slid open with a soft hiss. A tall figure stepped into the room, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light. It was Lord Callan. Callan moved with the calm, confident grace of someone who believed he was in complete control. He stopped a few feet away from John, staring down at him with a mixture of amusement and contempt. "Ah, the human awakens," Callan said smoothly, his voice like silk hiding the blade. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't survive the toxin. Humans are fragile, after all." John glared at him, his heart pounding with anger. "Where's Zora? What have you done to her?" Kellen chuckled, a low, chilling sound. The princess is exactly where she should be, under my control. But you're a problem I need to solve. John struggled against his chains again. You won't get away with this. She'll stop you. Kalen's smile widened. Oh, but she won't. You see, I've been planning this for years. The princess is nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. And you, human, have walked right into the middle of it. John's mind raced. What was Kalen talking about? What kind of game was he playing? Kalen began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Valyria has grown weak under the old traditions. Our people have become soft, relying on ancient laws and outdated customs. But I will change that. I will unite the Zilarians under my rule, and once I eliminate the princess, there will be no one left to challenge me. John's eyes narrowed. So that's it. You kill Zara, blame me, and take the throne. Kalen nodded. Exactly. The story writes itself. A foolish human stumbles into our world, insults our traditions, and murders the princess in a fit of rage. The people will demand vengeance. They will beg for a leader strong enough to protect them from your kind. John's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't let that happen. He had to find Zara and stop Kalen before it was too late. Kalen stepped closer, his cold eyes gleaming. But don't worry, human. You won't be alive to see any of it. Your death will be quick, but painful. He raised his hand, and a small device floated into the room, its sharp, metallic arms glinting in the dim light. It hovered near John's face, buzzing softly like an insect ready to strike. John gritted his teeth, bracing for the worst. But just as the device moved closer, there was a sudden explosion from somewhere outside the room. The walls trembled, and the lights flickered. Kalen's eyes widened in surprise. What the? Before he could react, the door to the room slammed open, and a figure burst in, blaster in hand. It was Zora. Her royal robes were torn, and there was a cut on her cheek, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. Without hesitation, she fired at the floating device, blasting it into pieces. "Get away from him, Kalen," she shouted. Kalen snarled, his calm demeanor shattered. "You foolish girl. You think you can stop me?" Zora didn't respond. She fired again, forcing Kalen to dive behind a control panel. She rushed to John's side, pulling a small device from her belt. With a quick swipe, the chains binding John snapped open. John rubbed his wrists, his heart racing. "Took you long enough." Zara smirked. "I had to make sure you weren't dead first." Before they could exchange more words, Kalen's voice echoed through the room. "You can't escape, Zara. The entire palace is under my control. You're trapped." Zara grabbed John's hand, pulling him to his feet. "Then we'll just have to fight our way out." They sprinted out of the room, blaster fire echoing behind them. The palace was in chaos. Guards loyal to Kalen clashed with those still loyal to the royal family. Explosions rocked the hallways, and smoke filled the air. As they ran, John turned to Zora. "What now? We can't outrun all of them." Zora's eyes sparkled with determination. "We don't need to outrun them. We need to get to the archives. The ritual is our only chance to break the marriage bond and expose Kalen's plot. If we can prove he's broken the sacred laws, his power will crumble." John nodded, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Let's do it." They fought their way through the palace, dodging blaster fire and using every trick they could think of to stay ahead of Kalen's forces. Along the way, they encountered allies, guards and servants who still believed in the royal family and were willing to help them. Finally, they'd reached the entrance to the royal archives, a massive door carved with ancient symbols. Zora placed her hand on the control panel, and the door slowly slid open. But just as they stepped inside, they heard Kalen's voice behind them. "You can't escape your fate, Zora. This ends now." They turned to see Kalen standing at the entrance, a blaster aimed directly at them, his silver eyes burning with rage. "The human advantage." The cold barrel of Callan's blaster glinted under the dim lights of the Royal Archives. John could feel the tension tightening like a noose around his neck. The massive chamber, lined with ancient scrolls and glowing crystals, suddenly felt like a trap rather than a sanctuary. Callan's silver eyes gleamed with triumph as he stepped into the room, blaster steady. Behind him, a squad of armored guards fanned out, their weapons aimed at John and Zora. "It's over, Princess," Callan sneered, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Drop your weapon, or I'll turn your human husband into ashes before your eyes." Zara gritted her teeth, her blaster still trained on Callan. "You won't get away with this, Callan." Callan chuckled darkly. "I already have." He motioned to the guards. "Seize them." John's mind raced. This is it. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. But then something clicked in his head. A memory, a trick from his past. Back on Earth, John wasn't just an explorer. He had grown up in the rough parts of his city, learning how to think fast and outsmart people bigger and stronger than him. He didn't have alien tech or royal training, but he had one thing Callan didn't expect: the unpredictable nature of a human. As the guards advanced, John whispered to Zara, "Trust me." Before she could respond, John lunged, not toward Callan, but toward the shelves of ancient scrolls and glowing artifacts. His sudden movement startled the guards, and in their confusion, one fired, but missed, hitting a glowing crystal instead. The crystal exploded in a burst of blinding light, sending shards of energy ricocheting around the room. The shockwave knocked several guards off their feet, and the blast gave Zara the split second she needed. She dove to the side, firing her blaster and taking down 2 guards before they could react. Callan roared in anger. "Kill them both." But John wasn't finished. He grabbed one of the ancient scrolls, its surface covered in strange, glowing symbols, and hurled it at the nearest guard. The scroll burst into a cloud of shimmering dust, blinding the guard and making him stumble backward. Zara used the distraction to slide across the floor, kicking another guard's weapon out of his hand. She grabbed his blaster and tossed it to John. "You wanted to be a warrior, human. Now's your chance." John caught the blaster, his heart pounding. "Guess it's time to improvise." The fight turned chaotic. Blaster fire echoed through the archives, but John's quick thinking and unpredictable moves kept Callan's guards off balance. While Zara fought with precision and skill, John used every dirty trick he knew, throwing artifacts, flipping over tables, and even tackling one guard into a shelf of ancient relics. Callan, furious, tried to get a clear shot at John, but the human's wild, reckless style made him impossible to predict. "You're nothing but a fool," Callan shouted. John grinned. "Yeah, but I'm a fool who's still standing." Finally, with most of the guards down or retreating, John and Zara turned their attention back to Callan. He stood near the entrance, breathing heavily, his blaster shaking in his hand. But his eyes still burned with determination. "This isn't over," he hissed, pressing a small device on his wrist. A hidden door behind him slid open, revealing a secret passage. Before they could stop him, Callan darted into the passage and disappeared. John cursed under his breath. "We can't let him get away." Zara shook her head, grabbing John's arm. "No, we have something more important to do." She pointed to the center of the archives, where a large pedestal stood, glowing with ancient energy. "The annulment ritual," she said. "If we break the marriage bond, Callan's plan will fall apart. He can't use our union to justify his rise to power." John nodded, his adrenaline still pumping. "All right, let's end this." They approached the pedestal, its surface covered in ancient Solarian symbols. Zara placed her hand on the pedestal, and a soft, humming light surrounded them. "This will take both of us," Zara said quietly. "The bond was formed by both of us, even if by accident. Now we both have to agree to break it." John hesitated for a moment, looking at Zara. In the chaos of the last few days, they had gone from strangers to unlikely allies. And now, standing there with her, he realized something unexpected. He wasn't sure he wanted to break the bond. But this wasn't the time to think about that. He placed his hand on the pedestal. Let's do it. The room filled with a bright light as the ritual began. The symbols on the pedestal glowed, and a soft, melodic voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in an ancient language John didn't understand. But Zara did. She translated softly as the ritual progressed. Do you, Zara of Valyria, reject this union? Zara's voice was steady. I do. The light pulsed, and the voice continued. Do you, John of Earth, reject this union? John hesitated, his heart pounding, but he forced a smile and nodded. I do. The light grew brighter, surrounding them in a warm glow. The ring on John's finger pulsed once, and then disintegrated into dust. For a moment, everything was silent. The bond was broken. But before they could celebrate, the entire palace shook with a violent tremor. The walls of the archives cracked, and a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the halls. Zara's eyes widened in horror. What is that? John's stomach dropped. I think Callan has a backup plan. Suddenly, the ground beneath them split open, and a massive mechanical creature emerged from the depths of the palace. It was a towering war machine, covered in alien weapons and glowing red eyes. A voice echoed from the palace speakers, Callan's voice. You think breaking the bond will stop me? I don't need your marriage to rule Valyria. I'll take it by force. The war machine roared to life, and the palace trembled under its power. Zara turned to John, her expression fierce. Looks like we've got one more fight. John tightened his grip on the blaster, a grin spreading across his face. Let's show them what humans can do. The betrayal. The massive war machine loomed over John and Zara, its red eyes glowing like burning coals in the dim light of the shattered royal archives. The ancient walls, once filled with the knowledge and history of Valyria, now trembled under the weight of Callan's treachery. The mechanical giant roared to life, its weapons primed and ready to destroy everything in its path. John's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on the blaster, glancing at Zara. Got any bright ideas, Princess? He asked, forcing a grin despite the fear gnawing at his insides. Zara's golden eyes narrowed, her face set in determination. One, but it's going to get us both killed if we're not fast. John chuckled, the adrenaline pushing away his doubts. I've been running from death since I got here. Let's do it. Zara pointed to a glowing blue crystal embedded in the war machine's chest. That's its power core. If we can hit it, we can shut the whole thing down. But Callan's not stupid. He'll have defenses protecting it. As if to prove her point, the war machine fired a beam of searing energy straight at them. They dove in opposite directions just in time, the blast melting the floor where they'd been standing. John scrambled behind a fallen pillar, breathing hard. I'm guessing ask nicely isn't an option. Zara rolled her eyes from behind another cover. You're married to a princess, not a miracle worker. They exchanged a quick glance and then moved together, darting between debris and dodging the machine's relentless attacks. The palace was falling apart around them. Ancient statues crumbled, and walls cracked under the pressure. But John's earthborn instincts kicked in. While Zara moved with the precision of someone trained in royal combat, John relied on raw, unpredictable tactics. He grabbed a loose metal shard from the ground and hurled it at the machine's face. It clanged harmlessly off the armor, but it distracted the beast long enough for Zara to get a clear shot. Her blaster beam struck one of the machine's legs, causing it to stumble. Nice shot, John shouted, ducking another energy blast. Zara didn't smile. It's not enough. We need to get closer to that core. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently. The war machine let out a mechanical roar and began charging directly at them, its massive feet crushing everything in its path. John's mind raced. They couldn't outrun it. Then, an idea struck him. Crazy, dangerous, but their only shot. Zara, Trust me," he yelled, sprinting toward the beast instead of away from it. Zora's eyes widened in horror. "John, what are you doing?" But John didn't stop. He zigzagged across the broken floor, dodging blasts and debris. The machine's sensors struggled to keep up with his erratic movements, and that's when Zora realized his plan. He was distracting it. While the machine focused on John, Zora circled around behind it, her blaster aimed at the exposed power core. She took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and fired. The shot hit dead center. The machine let out a deafening screech, stumbling forward as sparks flew from its chest. But it wasn't down yet. John barely had time to react as the beast, now raging blindly, swung one of its massive arms at him. The force sent him flying across the room, crashing into a pile of rubble. Pain shot through his body, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. Zora ran to his side, her face pale with concern. "John, are you okay?" He groaned, holding his side. "I've had worse. But we're not done yet, are we?" Zora shook her head, helping him up. "No, but that shot weakened it. One more hit to the core, and we can finish this." John nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "Then let's end it." They moved together, coordinating their attack. John used his blaster to target the machine's sensors, while Zora focused on the core. The machine staggered under their combined assault, its movements growing slower, more erratic. Finally, Zora saw her chance. She climbed onto a fallen pillar, giving herself a clear line of sight to the core. She took a deep breath, aimed, and fired the final shot. The beam struck the core, and the war machine exploded in a brilliant burst of light and energy. The shockwave knocked them both to the ground, but when the dust settled, the beast was nothing more than a smoking heap of metal. John coughed, pushing himself up on shaky arms. "Remind me never to buy alien jewelry again." Zora laughed softly, offering him a hand. "Deal." But their relief was short-lived. As they turned toward the exit, they were met with a chilling sight. Lord Kalen stood at the entrance, flanked by a new group of heavily armed guards. His silver eyes burned with fury, but his lips curled into a sinister smile. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" he sneered. John raised his blaster, but Kalen shook his head. "Don't bother. You're surrounded. And besides..." He stepped forward, his voice dripping with venom. "I have something you want." With a flick of his wrist, Kalen activated a hologram. It projected the image of Earth, and John's heart froze. "While you were busy playing heroes, I've been preparing my final move. A fleet of warships is on its way to your precious little planet. In less than 24 hours, Earth will be nothing but ash." John felt the blood drain from his face. "You're insane." Kalen's smile widened. "No, human. I'm a visionary. Valyria will rise, and your world will fall." Zora stepped forward, her voice cold and steady. "You'll never get away with this, Kalen. We'll stop you." Kalen laughed, a hollow, cruel sound. "You can try, but you're too late." He turned and began to walk away, his guards following him. John clenched his fists, his mind racing. Earth. His home. He couldn't let this happen. He looked at Zora, determination blazing in his eyes. "We're not done yet." Zora nodded, her expression fierce. "No, this is just the beginning." The final stand. The hologram of Earth flickered in the dim light of the ruined royal archives, casting a haunting blue glow across John's face. He could barely breathe as Kalen's chilling words echoed in his mind. "In less than 24 hours, Earth will be nothing but ash." For the first time since this nightmare began, John wasn't just fighting for his life or Zora's kingdom. He was fighting for home. The thought of his family, his friends, and the billions of innocent people on Earth filled him with a fury he didn't know he had. Zora's hand landed on his shoulder, grounding him. Her golden eyes were calm but fierce. "We can still stop him." John nodded, his jaw clenched. "We have to. But how?" Kalen's fleet was already on its way, and the palace was crawling with his loyal guards. The war machine they had just destroyed was only the beginning of Kalen's arsenal. If they didn't act fast, Earth wouldn't stand a chance. Zara led John through a hidden passage beneath the archives, her mind racing with plans. There's only one place we can go, the Royal Command Center. It controls Valeria's entire defense system. If we can get in, we can override Kalen's orders and recall the fleet. John raised an eyebrow. Sounds simple enough. What's the catch? Zara gave him a grim smile. The command center is in the heart of the palace, and it's locked with a genetic code. Only a member of the royal family can access it. John exhaled sharply. Well, lucky for us, you're still royalty. Zara's smile faded. That's the problem. Kalen's been planning this for years. I guarantee he's altered the system to lock me out. But she paused, a spark of hope flickering in her eyes. There might be a loophole. John frowned. What kind of loophole? Zara hesitated, then met his gaze. The system recognizes the royal bloodline, and anyone who's been bonded to it. John blinked. Wait, you mean because of the marriage bond? Zara nodded. Even though we annulled it, the system might still recognize you. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got. John ran a hand through his hair, the weight of their mission sinking in. All right, let's crash this system. The journey to the Royal Command Center was a battlefield. The once grand hallways of the palace were now war zones, filled with smoke, debris, and the sounds of blaster fire. Loyalists still fighting for Zara clashed with Kalen's forces at every turn. John and Zara moved swiftly, using every ounce of their strength and cunning to outmaneuver the enemy. John's human unpredictability proved to be an advantage once again. Solarians weren't used to his wild tactics. He set traps using palace debris, ambushed guards with makeshift weapons, and even tricked a patrol by disguising himself in fallen guard armor. Zara, on the other hand, fought with the grace and precision of a true warrior princess. She led their allies with fierce determination, her presence inspiring hope in those who still believed in the royal family. Finally, they reached the towering doors of the Royal Command Center. The entrance was guarded by Kalen's elite soldiers, massive figures in black armor, their faces hidden behind emotionless helmets. John glanced at Zara. Any chance we can talk our way in? Zara shook her head, raising her blaster. Not a chance. With that, they charged. The battle was brutal. John fought with everything he had, dodging blaster fire and using every trick he knew from Earth. Zara moved like a shadow, her blaster finding its mark with deadly accuracy. But just as they took down the last guard, the doors to the command center slammed shut, and Kalen's voice echoed from hidden speakers. I admire your persistence, but it's useless. You can't stop what's coming. John pounded on the door, frustration boiling over. You're not going to get away with this, Kalen. Kalen's laugh was cold and hollow. I already have. Zara stepped forward, placing her hand on the door's genetic scanner. As expected, it flashed red, denying her access. She turned to John, her expression serious. It's up to you now. John swallowed hard and placed his hand on the scanner. For a tense moment, nothing happened. But then, the light flashed green. The doors slid open with a hiss. John stared in disbelief. Guess the system still thinks I'm your husband. Zara smirked. For once, I'm glad Valerian tech is slow to update. Inside, the Royal Command Center was a marvel of alien technology. Massive holographic screens displayed the positions of Kalen's fleet, and the control panels pulsed with energy. But at the center of it all stood Kalen himself, flanked by his most loyal guards. His silver eyes narrowed when he saw them. You're more persistent than I thought. John raised his blaster. And you're more delusional than I thought. Kalen didn't flinch. You think you can stop me with brute force. This isn't some human bar fight, John. This is the future of Valeria. Zara stepped forward, her voice steady. You mean the destruction of Valyria. You're betraying everything our people stand for. Kalen sneered. Your people will thank me when I bring them power and dominance. And as for Earth, he pressed a button on his wrist, and a hologram of Earth zoomed in, showing the fleet drawing closer. It will serve as an example to the galaxy. John's blood ran cold. They were running out of time. The final battle erupted in a blur of blaster fire and chaos. Kalen's guards fought fiercely, but John and Zara had something Kalen didn't: purpose. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for their people, their worlds, and their future. John used his earthborn instincts to outmaneuver the guards, while Zara faced Kalen directly. Their blasters clashed, but Kalen was a skilled fighter, his rage fueling his strength. You're weak, Zara. Kalen spat, forcing her back. You rely on outdated traditions and humans. But Zara's eyes burned with defiance. No, Kalen. I rely on what's right. While Zara battled Kalen, John sprinted toward the main control panel. The interface was a mess of alien symbols, but he didn't need to understand it completely. He just needed to shut it down. As Kalen realized what John was doing, he roared in fury and broke away from Zara, charging toward John. But Zara was faster. She fired a single, precise shot, hitting Kalen in the leg and sending him crashing to the floor. John slammed his hand onto the control panel, praying the system still recognized him. The screens flickered, and then the fleet stopped. The hologram of Earth showed the warships halting mid-flight, their weapons powering down. The threat was over. Kalen lay on the floor, clutching his wounded leg, his silver eyes filled with hate. You think this is over? Zara stood over him, her blaster trained on his chest. It is for you. John stepped beside her, breathing hard but victorious. And Earth says thanks for playing. As Kalen was taken into custody, Zara turned to John, her expression softening. You saved my people. And yours. John chuckled, the weight of the past days finally lifting. Not bad for a human, huh? Zara smiled. Not bad at all. Husband. John groaned. Don't start that again. But as they stood together, victorious, both knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one they would face side by side. The choice. The Royal Command Center was finally silent. The hum of alien machinery faded, replaced by the heavy breathing of exhausted warriors. The hologram of Earth, once a target for destruction, now floated peacefully in the air. The threat of annihilation gone. Kalen's fleet had been stopped. The palace, though battered and broken, stood as a symbol of resilience. But for John and Zara, the battle wasn't over. They had saved their worlds, but what came next would test them in ways no war ever could. Kalen was dragged away by loyalist guards, his silver eyes still burning with hatred. His final words echoed in John's mind. You think you've won, but you'll never belong here, human. John watched as Kalen disappeared down the corridor, his heart heavy. The adrenaline from the fight was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion, pain, and something else he hadn't expected: uncertainty. He turned to Zara, who was standing quietly by the control panel, her golden eyes reflecting the holographic light of Earth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was filled with unspoken thoughts and emotions they weren't ready to face. Finally, John broke the silence. So, what now? Zara didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer to the hologram, her fingers brushing against the glowing image of Earth. I don't know, she admitted softly. We've stopped Kalen, but my people are still divided. They won't forget what happened here. John sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah. And Earth. Well, I don't think they're ready to hear about all this alien royalty drama. He chuckled weakly, trying to lighten the mood, but it didn't quite work. Zara turned to him, her expression serious. John, you could go home. You don't have to stay here. Your world is safe now. John's heart twisted. Go home. The words felt heavier than they should. He'd dreamed of going home since the moment he was dragged into this mess. But now, with the chance right in front of him, the idea didn't bring the comfort he expected. He looked at Zara, really looked at her, the fierce princess who had gone from a stranger to an ally, and maybe something more. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I could." For the next few days, the palace was a flurry of activity. Repairs were underway, and loyalists worked to restore order. Zara was at the center of it all, meeting with advisors, calming the people, and rebuilding the trust Kaelin had shattered. But every time Jon saw her, he felt that same tug in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline, the danger, or something deeper, but he knew one thing for certain. He didn't want to leave without knowing where they stood. On the eve of his departure, Jon found Zara in the palace gardens. The twin moons of the Lyria cast a soft light over the glowing plants, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of alien life. Zara was standing by a small fountain, staring into the water, lost in thought. Jon approached quietly. "You've been busy, princess." Zara smiled faintly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "There's a lot to fix." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Jon took a deep breath. "Zara, about us." She turned to him, her golden eyes searching his face. "What about us?" Jon hesitated. He wasn't good with words, especially not when it came to feelings. But he couldn't leave without saying it. "This whole time, I thought I just wanted to get out of here. Go home. Forget this ever happened. But now—" He paused, his heart pounding. "Now I'm not so sure." Zara's expression softened, and she stepped closer. "I'm not sure either." The tension between them broke, replaced by a quiet understanding. They didn't need to say more. The bond they'd formed went beyond words, beyond ancient rituals or royal laws. But choices still had to be made. The next morning, Jon stood at the palace landing bay, his belongings packed and ready. A ship was waiting to take him back to Earth, back to the life he'd left behind. Zara stood beside him, her royal robes flowing in the soft morning breeze. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. Jon chuckled. "Nope. But when has that ever stopped me?" They shared a smile, but there was a sadness beneath it. Jon stepped onto the ship, pausing at the entrance. He turned to Zara one last time. "You know, we never did get a real honeymoon." Zara laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Maybe one day." Jon nodded, his heart full. "Yeah, maybe one day." As the ship lifted off, Jon watched Valyria shrink beneath him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: his story wasn't over. And maybe, just maybe, it would lead him back to the fierce, golden-eyed princess who had changed his life forever. Because sometimes, the greatest adventures aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones you stumble into, accidental proposals and all.